So I want you to picture your typical Tuesday afternoon commute.
Right. Just a totally mundane day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just put yourself right there in the middle of it. You've got your coffee in one hand, maybe you're, idly scrolling through your phone with the other,
Yeah.
and you're entirely enveloped by that loud, kinetic energy of an ordinary city. Think about the layers of that environment.
All that background noise.
Right. You have cars rolling through the intersection, uh, the low, steady thrum of engines idling, tires hissing against the hot asphalt.
People talking construction, maybe?
Oh, yeah. Hundreds of people walking past you, weaving around each other, chatting on their phones, laughing, rushing back to the office. It's that constant, chaotic background hum of humanity.
Which we completely take for granted, honestly.
We really do. It's chaotic, sure, but it's a predictable chaos. It feels safe. It is the rhythmic pulse of reality doing exactly what reality is supposed to do.
Right.
And then without even, a fraction of a second of warning, there's a snap.
Not a fade, not some, gradual deceleration.
No, it's an instantaneous, violent halt to reality itself. Every single thing in your field of vision, every sound, every microscopic motion, it just stops.
It's basically the ultimate disruption of the baseline physics we rely on to navigate the world.
Yeah.
Usually when we encounter the concept of time stopping, whether that's in sci-fi or fantasy, it's presented as this elegant, almost cinematic effect.
Right, like a graceful pausing of the universe.
Exactly. But the scenario you're pulling us into is fundamentally different. It's an abrupt, catastrophic failure of continuity.
And that deeply unsettling premise is exactly what we are exploring today on this deep dive.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at some excerpts from a genuinely chilling narrative. It's a YouTube video transcript from the channel The Midnight Curator.
Oh, that's a fantastic channel.
It is. And this specific video is titled, "The Entire City Stopped." And then they all looked at me. When I first went through this source material, I was completely caught off guard.
It really flips the script on that trope.
It does. It takes this very familiar, almost comforting science fiction trope of stepping outside of time and twists it into this uniquely psychological, suffocating nightmare.
Yeah, suffocating is the perfect word for it.
Right. So our mission today is to tear down the mechanics of this story. We're going to look at the horrifying shift from individual autonomy, that core human belief that, you are the captain of your own ship, to the realization that you have been turned into a helpless puppet.
And we'll be analyzing not just the surface-level horror of being trapped, but the profound philosophical mechanisms at play here, too.
Let's unpack this.
Because this narrative is a masterclass in exploring forced assimilation. It asks what actually happens when a synchronized consciousness weaponizes the everyday environment against a single, isolated individual.
It completely challenges the very concept of free will.
It really does.
Okay, so let's start right at the fracture point. The transition from that loud, predictable Tuesday commute to this total severed reality. The snap. The text is incredibly specific about the exactness of this freeze. Like you said, it isn't a slow motion effect where things gradually grind to a halt.
No, it's violent.
It's a violent severing. You have a car mid-turn that just locks into place, its suspension still compressed on one side.
That's such a great visual.
Yeah, or a pedestrian caught mid-step, their foot just hovering inches over the pavement, completely defying gravity. But there's one detail that really got under my skin, and I keep thinking about it.
Oh, the laugh.
Yes, a laugh is severed exactly halfway through.
That severed laugh is a brilliant, terrifying detail because it forces us to consider the actual physics of sound.
Right.
A laugh isn't an object you can just pause. It's a continuous physical process. It requires the exhalation of breath from the lungs, the rapid vibration of the vocal cords, and the acoustic resonance of the air molecules carrying those sound waves to your ear.
So it's highly kinetic.
Exactly. So to sever a laugh halfway through implies that the very air itself has stopped conducting kinetic energy. The universe has been paused with surgical, almost clinical precision.
Wow.
And the immediate result of that is absolute sensory deprivation.
Which is something our brains are literally unequipped to handle. You search the air for any sound, a distant siren, the hum of an engine a few blocks over, even just the rustle of wind.
But there's nothing.
Nothing. You find only the rush of your own breath and the heavy, isolated thud of your own pulse. It's like being dropped into an anechoic chamber without your consent.
Let's actually linger on that anechoic chamber comparison because it perfectly explains the psychological shock to the system here.
Yeah, break that down for us.
So an anechoic chamber is a room designed to completely absorb reflections of sound or electromagnetic waves. It is so quiet that the background noise level actually approaches negative decibels.
Which is hard to even wrap your mind around.
Yeah.
Negative decibel.
It is. And when people are placed inside these chambers, they become disoriented incredibly fast. The human brain is, at its core, an aggressive pattern-matching machine.
Right.
It's constantly processing ambient noise to map its surroundings. When you strip that noise away entirely, the brain scrambles to fill the void.
It basically turns inward.
Exactly. It forces this intense, suffocating internal focus. You suddenly become hyper-aware of your own biology.
Like hearing your own heartbeat.
Yes. The thud of your pulse becomes deafening because, in this frozen world, it is the only empirical proof you have that time, or at least your personal biological time, is still moving forward.
Man, that is a jarring isolation. You're no longer a participant in the environment. You're an anomaly within it.
Anomaly, yeah.
But the narrator's immediate reaction to this anomaly is fascinating to me because it doesn't start with sheer terror.
No, not at all.
Initially, there's this almost intoxicating illusion of exceptionalism. You're standing there, listening to your heartbeat, waiting for the world to catch up.
Right.
And when it doesn't, you look down at your hands. You flex your fingers, you step back, you turn in a full circle. And the source specifically highlights that your body moves with, quote, fluid ease against this backdrop of rigid, impossible sculptures.
Fluid ease.
Yeah. Now, if this happened to me, I think my first instinct, once I realized I wasn't having a stroke, might be a sense of awe.
Sure. You feel like you've unlocked something.
It feels empowering.
Yeah.
Like you've hacked reality. You are the protagonist of the universe, the only thing moving in a static world.
Well, it's a very natural human reaction to mistake isolation for elevation.
Yeah.
You think you have transcended the rules of physics.
Right.
But that fluid ease is incredibly deceptive. It's a psychological trap. It creates a false sense of security and autonomy.
Because you can move.
Exactly. You believe you have agency simply because you possess mobility while others do not. But the reality is that the physical environment is already beginning to mirror an internal isolation that you just haven't recognized yet.
Wow.
You aren't elevated above the crowd. You are severed from the organism.
It makes me think of it like a cell in the human body. If one single cell suddenly starts operating on completely different rules than the surrounding tissue, just ignoring the chemical signals and doing its own thing, the body doesn't view that cell as special or elevated.
No, the body views it as a pathogen or as a cancer.
Right.
In a biological or sociological context, a component that is suddenly severed from its surrounding system is usually in extreme danger, or it is the danger.
That's a terrifying way to look at it.
The feeling of empowerment is an illusion meant to keep you moving, to keep you engaging with the parameters of the trap before you realize the door has locked behind you.
And that sense of empowerment evaporates with brutal speed as soon as you start actually moving through this environment. You weave through the frozen crowds, stepping around people, and your footsteps sound unnaturally loud against the asphalt.
You're drawing attention to yourself.
Yeah, you are no longer blending in. You are this loud, discordant note in a completely silent room. Then there's a distinct sensory shift. The air itself begins to change.
Right. The density.
Yeah, the text describes it as feeling dense, as if the stillness itself has weight.
That is the physical manifestation of paranoia creeping into the narrative. The environment is shifting from being a passive frozen background to an active antagonist.
It's not just an empty stage anymore.
Exactly. The dense air is the first subtle indicator that the environment is hostile. It's pushing back against your movement.
It's not just empty space.
Right. Think about fluid dynamics. When you walk down the street normally, you don't feel the air parting around you. But when you move through water, you feel the resistance with every step.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Here, the narrator is beginning to feel the resistance of the frozen reality. The environment is actively rejecting their autonomy.
So it's visceral.
Highly visceral. The loss of freedom isn't just going to be some intellectual realization. It is manifesting as a tangible, physical weight pressing down on the narrator's shoulders. The stillness is heavy with intent.
Under the crushing weight of that dense air, you start desperately looking for a lifeline. You start searching the faces of the people you pass, looking for a twitch of a lip, a flaring nostril, a blink.
Anything human.
Anything. And I want to pause on this instinct, because Logically, it doesn't make sense.
How so?
Well, if you have just watched a 4,000-pound SUV freeze mid-turn and seen gravity stop working, why would you look for a twitch of a lip? Why not just accept that time has stopped and these people are essentially marble statues?
Yeah.
What drives that desperate search for microexpressions?
Because humans are fundamentally biologically social creatures, our entire cognitive framework relies on social mirroring.
Okay.
Our brains are hardwired with mirror neurons that constantly scan the faces of those around us to regulate our own emotional states and to confirm our shared reality.
Oh, interesting.
It is how we intuitively know what is safe, what is alarming, what is appropriate.
It's why laughing is contagious, or why a crowded room suddenly goes tense if one person looks terrified.
Precisely. We basically outsource a portion of our reality testing to the collective. When you are suddenly and completely deprived of those micro-expressions, the ego, that core sense of self, begins to destabilize.
You lose your anchor.
Yes. The narrator is unconsciously seeking validation that they are not entirely alone in the universe, that they are still tethered to a shared human reality. Without that reflection from another human consciousness, the mind begins to fracture.
You're looking for a blink, because a blink means there's another mind present.
Exactly. It's a desperate grasp for connection in a sensory void.
But the connection they find is the exact opposite of what they were hoping for. This is the moment the thought experiment pivots from strange to utterly terrifying. Imagine you are the narrator, right? You stop in front of a woman frozen mid-stride, her jaw, her shoulders, the wrinkles in her coat, they remain perfectly, impossibly set.
Frozen.
But her eyes begin to move.
Oh.
The text describes them shifting sideways, slowly and mechanically, until her pupils lock directly onto yours. Here's where it gets really interesting. It's like walking through a wax museum, right? You expect the figures to be frozen, but suddenly the statues start tracking your movements.
Right.
The horror isn't that they're springing to life. If she just gasped and started moving, that would almost be a relief.
It would break the tension.
Exactly. The horror is that she is trapped, static, but actively watching.
The contrast between the rigid, paralyzed body and the slow, mechanical movement of the eyes is deeply unsettling. It strips away the comfort of the frozen time hypothesis.
Because frozen time would mean frozen everything.
Exactly. If time were genuinely stopped, the eyes wouldn't be able to move. The fact that the eyes move, and move mechanically, suggests an overriding of the woman's own biology. Her body has essentially been reduced to a piece of machinery, and the camera her eyes has just been activated to track a target.
And it isn't just her. You stumble backward, and the scale of the horror expands exponentially. You see the driver behind a frozen windshield. You see people staring from second-story windows. You see pedestrians on the far side of the intersection. Thousands of eyes are swiveling in their sockets to follow your every move.
It's completely overwhelming.
The scope of this surveillance is paralyzing.
We can connect this directly to the concept of the panopticon.
Oh, right.
This was a theory of surveillance developed by the 18th century philosopher Jeremy Bentham.
The circular prison design, right, where the guard tower is in the exact center and the cells are arranged around it.
Exactly. The architectural genius and cruelty of Bentham's panopticon is that the inmates can be observed by a single watchman in the central tower, but they cannot see inside the tower.
So they never know if they're actually being watched.
Right. They never know whether or not they're being watched at any given moment. Because they might be watched at any second, they're forced to constantly regulate their own behavior. They internalize the surveillance.
That makes sense.
Michel Foucault later expanded on this, arguing that modern society operates much like a panopticon, using invisible systems of surveillance to enforce compliance.
But how does that map to this frozen street? Because in this scenario, the narrator isn't in a cell looking at a hidden tower.
That is the horrifying inversion. The narrator is experiencing an inverted panopticon.
Okay, an inverted panopticon.
There is no central watchtower. Instead, the entire world has become the watchtower, and the narrator is the sole inmate exposed in the center. Every single point of the environment is an eye.
Oh, wow. That's terrifying.
It perfectly physicalizes the modern anxiety of surveillance capitalism, where the background noise of society, every smartphone camera, every digital footprint, every algorithm suddenly drops the facade and reveals itself as an active recording mechanism focused entirely on you.
And the source material brings this realization home. The narrator understands in this moment. This isn't a lapse in time. These people are conscious, trapped inside their own paralyzed forms, and they are recording every step you take.
Conscious prison.
Yeah. Hold on, though. Are we giving the crowd too much villainous intent here? When you really think about it, There is a profound sense of tragedy evoked. The crowd isn't inherently evil. They aren't monsters springing a trap. They are victims too, aren't they?
They absolutely are, and that is a crucial distinction that deepens the horror.
Right.
The terror is amplified precisely because these aren't mindless zombies or soulless automatons. They are conscious prisoners within their own bodies. The narrator realizes that thousands of individual human minds are awake, terrified, and fundamentally powerless.
They can't do anything but watch.
Exactly. They have been forced to act as living security cameras for whatever entity is orchestrating this.
So they're experiencing that exact same biological severing we talked about earlier, just entirely internalized.
Exactly. It introduces the core theme of forced assimilation. Their individual autonomy has been completely erased. They have no choice but to look.
Man.
And for the narrator, the realization that they are the focal point of this synchronized consciousness is the death of their perceived exceptionalism.
So much for feeling like a superhero.
Right. You thought you were special because you could move. Now you realize you were merely the exhibit. Moving wasn't a superpower. Moving was exactly what the system expected you to do to identify yourself.
The system expected it, and now the system reacts to it. Because the progression from passive observation, just thousands of eyes tracking you, moves into an active, coordinated reaction.
Right. It escalates.
The narrative states that the observation turns into a reaction without shifting their bodies or breaking their poses. Instead, the corners of their mouths begin to stretch upward into identical fixed smiles.
The biomechanical horror of this specific detail cannot be overstated.
It's so creepy.
In psychology and evolutionary biology, we talk about the Duchenne smile.
Okay, what is that?
A Duchenne smile is a genuine expression of happiness. It involves not just the zygomatic major muscle, which pulls the corners of the mouth up, but also the orbicularis oculi muscle, which surrounds the eyes.
Oh, so it creates those little crinkles at the corners of your eye.
Yes, it is an involuntary reflex of true positive emotion.
You could always tell a fake smile because the eyes are dead.
Precisely. What is described here is the extreme, weaponized opposite of a Duchenne smile. It's the isolated mechanical flexing of the zygomatic major muscle without any corresponding engagement of the eyes or the rest of the facial musculature.
Just the mouth moving.
Humans are instinctively, evolutionarily repulsed by this expression. It registers in our primitive brain as inherently predatory, deceptive, and unnatural.
Like a predator baring its teeth.
Yes. It is the baring of teeth masquerading as joy. It is the visual signature of a mass being forced onto a population.
And it isn't just one person making this terrifying expression. It is the unnatural uniformity of it. The text describes this expression rippling through the crowd like a synchronized wave.
A wave, yes.
It passes from the people nearest to you all the way down the avenues to the thousands standing blocks away. It is a single coordinated movement performed by a population that shouldn't possess the motor function to move at all.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, consider the implications of that synchronization. We see swarm intelligence in nature, flocks of starlings murmuring, schools of fish changing direction instantly.
Right.
But those are collections of individuals responding to local rules. What we are witnessing here is a unified network. This is the exact moment the narrative reveals the full scope of the threat.
This hive mind.
Exactly. The city ceases to be a collection of individuals with separate lives, separate thoughts, and separate intentions. It becomes a single, unified organism. You are no longer dealing with thousands of people. You are dealing with a single predator that happens to possess thousands of faces.
It's a terrifying display of raw processing power.
It is. The wave of smiles is a display of immense computational and biological control. It is the controlling entity flexing its power, demonstrating that it has perfectly synchronized millions of biological systems into one networked hive mind. The concept of the individual is dead. Only the collective remains.
And as if that visual display of dominance wasn't enough, the collective then launches an auditory assault that directly attacks your sense of agency.
Right, the sound.
The visual wave of smiles is immediately followed by what the source calls the sound. It begins as a whisper that seems to come from every unmoving mouth at once, but it rapidly grows into a layered, endless hiss that vibrates against your skin. Just imagine the physical sensation of that. thousands of whispering voices converging on you until it becomes a tactile vibration.
This is the weaponization of sound. When thousands of voices whisper simultaneously, the overlapping frequencies cause the sound to cease being language and become a physical force.
Like a pressure.
Exactly. The vibration against the skin is an invasion of the narrator's personal boundaries. You can close your eyes to block out the predatory smiles, but you cannot easily block out a sound that is permeating the very air, vibrating your eardrums, and resonating through your skeletal structure via bone conduction.
Wow, bone conduction.
It is an acoustic trap designed to disorient, increase cognitive load, and overwhelm the central nervous system, breaking down any remaining psychological resistance.
And the actual content of that whisper is engineered to completely dismantle you. Through that endless hiss, they repeat 3 specific phrases. You stopped, you listened, and you're ready.
Those specific phrases.
When I was reading that, it immediately made me think of those predatory terms of service agreements we click past every day.
The pop-ups on websites.
Exactly. The ones that say, by continuing to use this site, you consent to our data tracking. You didn't actively agree to anything, but by merely existing in that digital space and reacting naturally, you supposedly consented.
That's a great point.
This hive mind is doing the exact same thing. By stopping when the fundamental laws of physics broke, by listening to the terrifying silence, by reacting naturally to an unnatural stimulus, you've triggered the trap. You consented just by being human.
That analogy is incredibly perceptive. It highlights the use of the illusion of consent as a weapon of psychological cruelty. Let's really analyze the phrasing. You stopped, you listened, and you're ready.
Yeah.
These are framed as actions the narrator deliberately chose to take. The collective is essentially saying, we didn't capture you. You walked into the cage, examined the locks, and closed the door yourself.
Oh, that's sick.
It forces the victim to take responsibility for their own entrapment.
Which is a classic interrogation tactic.
It is a cornerstone of psychological manipulation. If an interrogator or a controlling system can convince the subject that their current predicament is the direct, logical result of their own choices, the subject's will to fight back collapses.
Right, because you blame yourself.
Exactly. If you believe you are a victim of random violence, you fight. If you believe you are responsible for your own downfall, you submit. The phrases confirm that by pausing to pay attention, the narrator fulfilled the exact behavioral design of the trap.
But the narrator doesn't submit quietly. That intense psychological manipulation triggers a desperate, instinctual, physical rebellion. You try to shout. You try to verbally reject the sound of these voices to assert your own existence.
To fight back.
But the text says that the no that leaves your throat sounds distorted. It feels as if your vocal cords are being plucked by hands other than your own.
And this brings us to the threshold of physical autonomy. Up until this moment, the external world was controlled. The people around the narrator were controlled. But the narrator still maintained their internal physical agency.
They could still move and breathe.
Right. They were walking, they were breathing, they commanded their own body. The distortion of the voice signifies the exact moment the infection of the hive mind breaches the narrator's physical boundary.
Because the vocal cords are muscles.
Yeah.
You have to consciously or at least subconsciously command them to contract and vibrate at specific tensions to produce speech.
Yes. The neurological pathways between the motor cortex and the larynx are being intercepted. The body has officially become compliant hardware.
Compliant hardware. That's terrifying.
The external signals of the collective have bypassed the narrator's conscious will and are now directly manipulating their biology. When you can no longer trust the sounds coming out of your own mouth, your sense of self is entirely shattered.
You're disconnected from yourself.
You are no longer the exclusive operator of the machine that is your body. You have been demoted to a passenger.
And just as you realize you are a passenger in your own body, the architect of this nightmare reveals itself. You feel a sudden, suffocating shift in the air directly behind you.
It gets very close.
You can't see what's there, but the text emphasizes the tactile intimacy of it. You feel the radiation of body heat just inches from the back of your neck. And then a soft, amused laugh brushes against your ear.
Yeah, that's disturbing.
Let's pause on that contrast. We just spent all this time establishing the vast macro scale of this horror. Thousands of synchronized people. An endless layered hiss. A citywide trap. Why does this unseen entity, the control center of this entire phenomenon, suddenly get so incredibly intimate? Why the body heat? Why the soft, amused laugh?
Because intimacy in this context is the ultimate display of absolute dominance.
Right.
Think about it. The entity operates on a massive citywide scale, controlling thousands of minds and bending the laws of physics simultaneously. By suddenly narrowing its focus from the macro down to the microscopic hairs on the back of the narrator's neck, it demonstrates absolute precision.
He's showing off.
It proves that the vastness of the network doesn't dilute its focus. It doesn't need to be loud. It has already won.
In the laugh.
The amused laugh is particularly devastating because it highlights the staggering power asymmetry. It highlights the triviality of the narrator's struggle.
Like it's a joke to them.
Exactly. The narrator's entire life, their free will, their mounting terror, it is merely a mild amusement to this force. Think of a scientist watching an ant try to navigate a complex maze.
Oh, wow.
The scientist isn't threatened by the ant. They might even find its frantic movements amusing, knowing full well the maze has no exit. The intimacy strips away any illusion of a grand, epic battle between a hero and a villain. It frames the event as the mundane, calculated extermination of a single identity.
A calculated extermination that begins with a single contradictory command. The unseen entity whispers, "Don't turn around."
Right.
But immediately, the physical manifestation of control contradicts that verbal instruction. Your legs begin to feel heavy, as if the pavement is starting to pull at your feet. The control you had over your own movements just moments ago is being methodically stripped away.
So it's fighting itself.
Why give the command, "Don't turn around," if the system is actively taking control of the physical body to force that exact movement?
It is a stress test of the compliant hardware. It's a calibration of the psychological override. By commanding the conscious mind not to do something, while simultaneously initiating the physical neurological process that will inevitably force the body to do it, the entity is generating immense cognitive dissonance.
It's forcing the mind to actively fight its own body.
Exactly. And that internal friction burns out the last remaining reserves of individual willpower. It proves to the narrator that the spoken command, the appeal to their rational decision-making mind, is entirely irrelevant.
The rational mind is obsolete.
The true language of this new reality is the physical override.
And as that physical override takes hold, as your feet feel cemented to the ground, you have this crushing, world-ending epiphany. The logic of the entire situation becomes brutally clear.
The big reveal.
The frozen city isn't just a bizarre weather event or a glitch in time. It is a machine. And you, the narrator, the listener, are the only moving part it was designed to catch.
What's fascinating here is that this is a complete, devastating inversion of the narrator's initial assumption. Remember the illusion of exceptionalism from the first moments of the snap.
Right, the feeling of elevation. I'm special because I can move.
No, that same exceptionalism is revealed to be the very mechanism of their doom. They weren't moving because they were immune to the freeze. They were moving because the trap was designed to isolate the one variable that hadn't been assimilated yet.
So they were the target all along.
The thousands of paralyzed people are not collateral damage in some cosmic event. They are, as the text explicitly states, a captive, manufactured audience. They were groomed, hijacked, and placed specifically in this configuration to witness this final act.
The existential dread of that realization is staggering. You realize you weren't a random bystander who just happened to be in the wrong intersection on a Tuesday afternoon. You were a long-term target.
Yep.
Your entire existence, the route you took to work, the coffee you bought, the pace of your walk, it was all a staged preamble leading to this exact set of coordinates at this exact second. It implies a level of surveillance, manipulation, and grooming that retroactively paints every memory and every decision you ever thought was your own.
It completely annihilates the philosophical concept of free will.
Yeah, there is no free will in this scenario.
If your entire life was essentially a funnel designed to deposit you at this exact intersection so a localized hive mind could absorb you, then you never truly lived an independent life. You were never the captain of your ship.
Wow.
You were just a piece of self-executing code following a predetermined path toward your own deletion. The city was a machine, and you were just the final necessary gear slotting into place to complete the circuit.
And we experience that gear slotting into place in the final agonizing sequence. The presence at your back leans in even closer. Its breath is cold against your skin, which is a sharp, jarring contrast to the radiation of body heat from just a moment ago.
It's chilling,
Yeah.
literally.
And it whispers one final instruction. Finish it. The text makes it undeniably clear. Reality has been engineered into a coordinated cage to force this one specific outcome. And then the physical takeover is absolute. Your neck begins to rotate. You aren't giving the command, but your muscles contract anyway, pulling your head around by millimeters.
Let's focus on the mechanics of that phrase, finish it.
Okay.
The entity isn't physically grabbing the narrator's head with its hands and forcing it to turn. It isn't using external physical leverage. It has co-opted the narrator's own nervous system to do the work. The instruction, finish it, is not directed at the narrator's mind. It is a command executed directly by the motor cortex.
So the narrator's consciousness is now completely severed from their motor functions.
It is forced assimilation at the cellular level. The brain is screaming no, but the muscles, the tendons, the cervical spine, they now belong to the network.
They're just following orders.
They are obeying the ping from the central server. It is similar to the ideomotor phenomenon, where a subject makes motions unconsciously, but weaponized to an extreme biological degree.
And as the body betrays the mind, moving millimeter by agonizing millimeter, the environment reacts to this submission. The thousands of frozen figures, that captive manufactured audience, they subtly lean forward.
They're waiting for it.
They are straining to watch, their unblinking eyes wide, with anticipation for the moment you finally look back. So what does this actually mean? The audience isn't just passively watching a show anymore, are they? Their role has shifted.
They are active participants in the physical override. In philosophy of mind, there is a concept called collective intentionality, the power of minds to be jointly directed at objects or states of affairs.
Okay.
The text suggests that the free will of the narrator has been entirely replaced by the collective intent of the crowd. The millions of minds, synchronized and focused intensely on this single point in space and time, are generating a palpable physical force. It is as if the combined gravity of their synchronized consciousness is the actual mechanism pulling the narrator's head around.
The gravity of consciousness. That is a brilliant way to phrase it. The individual cannot resist the sheer weight of a network population. It is mathematically impossible.
And that is the true horror of the trap. You are not being defeated by a stronger opponent. You are being absorbed by a system whose scale renders your individual resistance biologically irrelevant.
The weight of the hive mind is inescapable. And that brings us to the point of no return. The final, chilling realization from the text. The narrator knows with absolute certainty that once they see the face of the entity behind them, the version of reality they once knew will be gone forever.
There's no going back.
As the gaze finally meets the entity, the turn is complete. The boundary between the self and the collective dissolves. The ego is wiped clean. Personal identity is lost to the inescapable network. The deep dive into this source material leaves us with a truly horrifying picture of assimilation, doesn't it?
It does. It preys on our deepest, most primal fears of losing our agency. It isn't a horror reliant on violence, gore, or monsters leaping out of the dark.
What?
It is the systematic, synchronized overriding of our minds and our bodies by external forces. It acts as a profound metaphor for how easily the individual can be consumed by the collective, how our environments can turn against us, and how incredibly fragile our illusion of control truly is when faced with a system designed specifically to strip it away.
And it leaves you questioning the very nature of your own surroundings. It infects your perception of the everyday. Think about it. The next time you walk down a crowded city street and the noise of the world feels just a little too loud, the kinetic energy just a little too chaotic, ask yourself, if everyone around you suddenly stopped moving, how long would it take you to realize they were all watching you?
A question that fundamentally redefines the concept of being alone in a crowd.
It really does. Thank you all for joining us on this deep dive. We've certainly given you a lot to think about on your next commute. Stay curious, stay observant, and we will catch you on the next one.